In the ancient world, people placed heavy stones on the graves of the dead, and their souls would not wander to afflict the living. I always thought this was simply the practice of superstitious and primitive people, but I was about to learn that the dead can hover on the edge of our vision with the density and luminosity of mist, and their claim on the earth can be as legitimate and tenacious as our own. Tommy Lee Jones says that to start a movie. He thought I came up with that. I'm not that poetic. No, that's a Tommy Lee Jones movie. It was a bad movie. It has nothing to do with spirituality. It's like this racial murder mystery in the South kind of thing. But what a way to start the first part of a movie. The dead can hover on the edge of our vision with the density and luminosity of mist. I don't even know what that means. Does anyone know what that means? But it sounds so true. It sounds so meaningful. At least I think that the dead deserve some kind of claim, because I want to remember the people who've gone before. I want to remember the people who I know in my life now are going to go soon. I want to be shaped by the best of those who have come before us all. I want myself to continue having some impact on the world after these 30, 40, 70, 80 years that I have. Don't you? You want to have some kind of claim on that. And if our spirit or our soul or our shade or our mist, or whatever you want to call it, even if that doesn't hold kind of a ghostly claim on the earth, which some of us think is kind of silly, other folks realize strange things happen in the world, but even if the dead don't interact or look down on us or communicate or anything like that, don't you want to believe that the people who have passed still matter somewhere, somehow? Don't you want to matter in their hearts and their minds? And don't you want your life to be meaningful in the grand scheme of everything? Amen? Yeah. But that's way too heavy place to start for a sermon. So we're going to back up for outdoor worship. Back up and let's take a step back, because when it comes to the things that happen after death, there's 40, 50 people here, something like that, and we have 40 or 50 different ideas about what's going to happen after that. You believe one thing and you believe something else. You've read books about this and you're convinced by it. You have visions about this and you're convinced by that. And for all of our ideas, all of our theories and details, do you know how much we collectively know about what happens after death? Squadoosh. Zero. Nothing. Death is this great mystery, and we have hints, we have hopes, we have promises, we have stories, but we don't know anything about what it will feel like, what it will be like. We don't know anything about then, so our best bet is to start with now. And what do we know about now? What do we know about the deepest part of us? Whatever it is that we call our soul or our spirit or our mind or that part of you that makes you you, what is that thing? What is that thing in those of us who sit right here? And what does that thing have to do with the bodies that are sitting right here? Our bodies can do amazing things. 2 nights ago, I went to Cirque du Soleil, and I watched people can do absolutely the most amazing things any bodies have ever been able to do. There was contortionists, these 4 girls who could twist and balance. It's kind of gross, really, what they could do to bend things. And there were guys who could, these great muscular guys swinging around. There was a guy who could juggle and then get floated up into the air and then juggle while he was coming down. The best of it were these, I don't know, these gymnast guys, and they would jump on each other's shoulders like you used to probably chicken fight in the pool. You put someone on your shoulders. Well, they would stand on each other's shoulders, and then they would flip back and forth over each other's shoulders and back and forth and throw each other. And then at the end, they got one really like a big strong guy like James back there, and then they took another guy and they flipped him. He did a couple flips and landed on his shoulders, someone like me. And then they took another guy who was a little smaller like Aiden, and they threw him all the way up on top of my shoulders, and everyone's like, wow, this is amazing. And then they took someone like Hayden and they threw him up on top of it. It was 4 people standing on each other's shoulders, and the guy at the bottom is just kind of like holding on, and they stood there, and then they hopped off like it was nothing. Bodies can do amazing things, but our spirits can do something even better. Think of the strength it takes to cope through some of the difficult things of your life. Think of the courage it takes to face the pain that approaches us, the tenderness that we bring to love and relationships and to meet each other. To me, that stuff is just way more interesting than what our meat machines can do. That stuff just means more to the world. And if that's so, if our spirit means something more in the here and now, what we really want to know is, what happens to that grace and that love and that wonder that is in us after these bodies wind down? What happens to that other thing? What happens to that part of us that matters so much to who we are and to how the world works? In other words, there's really two kind of deep questions around this. One, what are we as humans, as people? And two, what does that say about what happens later? And so we're going to start with the easy part, because Genesis is at least as poetic as a Tommy Lee Jones movie. And it says we are made of dirt, dust. And later in the same book in Genesis, it says that dust becomes dust again, where we get that beautiful funeral poetry of dust to dust, ashes to ashes, earth to earth. And so the Bible, and biologists for that matter, they agree that some important part of us, very important part of us, is just this grounded material. Some important part of us is the soil from which life sprouts and unfolds. Something about us is just kind of a latent garden waiting to become. Maybe you're going to become orderly, or maybe you're going to become wild. Maybe you're going to have thorns, maybe roses. Maybe you'll find ways to produce food for people or medicine for people. But whatever it is that each of us are in our own garden, the point is that we are essentially soil waiting to be tilled by the world. And astronomers, if Emily was here, she's an astronomer, she would agree too in a different way. They have a wider perspective on all of this. Their story is that billions of years ago, the same stuff that made this star and that star that are so far apart you can't even count that high, the same stuff that made all the stars in the sky and the moon, it floated together to make this solar system and this earth, and made these plants and those animals, and then we ate that stuff, and so here we are, stardust, one day to become stardust again. And that is true, and that is beautiful, and that is majestic. And to believe that God designed a universe so interconnected, that inspires awe from me. I love the science of it. I love the beauty of it. I love the faith of it. Amen? But is that it? Is that the end of the story? Dust to dust, stardust to stardust? It tells a good and true story about us, but it is not complete. Some people might think so, but most people, even if they don't go in at all for the religious stuff at all, they sure hope. They want to believe that life means something more than dust. Poets speak of something so much deeper. I know plenty of scientists. They know how complicated the neurons are in our brain. They know better than any of us how complicated that is, but they just can't reconcile the fact that this stuff creates mind. They can't. The only words they can use are that something happens, that spirit emerges. Philosophers, they disagree about everything. That's their job. I was a philosopher before this ministry thing, but most of them, in some way or another, they tend to think, on one hand, we are these material things and we react and we respond kind of like determined machines. But on the other hand, many, many philosophers think there's something fundamental about how we're put together that emerges out of the complexity of our brains. Sort of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Philosophers use a big word for this: epiphenomenalism. We say that together? Epiphenomenalism. Now, my preaching professor told me never to use 8-syllable words in a sermon. He made sure, in our preaching final at Harvard was in a bar, which was kind of awesome. So we gathered in this bar, and what we did was we pulled a name out of a hat, and our job was then to give a 2-minute toast to the person whose name we did, but we did it in their style. Right? So if I was to pull out Kathleen's name, since she just laughed, I would have to do 2 minutes talking like Kathleen, which I don't even know how to do that. I haven't practiced. But that was the point, is we had to practice all year paying attention to how each other talked and how we used our hands, and apparently I pointed a lot back in those days, and I've stopped pointing, I hope. But we drew each other's names, and then someone was going to draw my name and do me. And unfortunately, it wasn't one of the students. It was the professor drew my name, and I'm sitting there, hovering on the edge of a B and an A. And the professor gets up, and his point was that I just used far too many big words. So he stands up and he says every dumb philosophy word that I said the whole year. He said, "We are gathered here to appreciate the ontological halicity of Hansen's friggin' metaphysics." Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So the point was is that I drivel on about stuff that barely makes any sense, and most of y'all are used to that, and you put up with it. But a lot of philosophers. Epiphenomenalism is a big word that means there's something more than just these dusty machines that we are. And whatever it is, mind, spirit, soul, it comes together like a symphony. There was a fiddle playing just a second ago, and fiddles are gorgeous. They can give beautiful music. But when the fiddle joins in with other instruments, there's something deeper happens when you put those together. Some people think you would call that spiritual when it fits all together. What does faith say to all this? Well, the way Genesis talks about it, we are all breathed into by God. We are infused by the Hebrew word for this really cool phrase, Ruach Elohim. Elohim is this great word for God. Ruach, let's say that one together because you get to the at the end. Ruach. Yeah, some good Hebrew scholars out there. Ruach. It means breath. It means wind. It means spirit. Same word means all of them. Later, Jesus would talk the same way, and in Greek, the word is pneuma, just like with a P in the N in the beginning of it, just like pneumonia means breath. Pneuma means wind. Pneuma means spirit. All together. And so dust we are, and we are inspirited by God. We are bodies with ruach. We are bodies with pneuma. And people of faith, Christian ones, whether they're conservative or liberal, Buddhist ones, and Native Americans and Jews and Hindus, you can ask poets and philosophers and scientists. So many people seem to think in some way, with different perspectives and explanations and symbols and stories, so many people seem to think there is a soil in us for life to grow, and there is something that connects us deeply to the source of all life, everywhere. How are those connected? I don't know. Are they separate? Do they fit together? Do they rely on each other some way? I don't know. What is the spirit like? What makes one person's spirit different from another person's spirit? And what makes some spirits seem really connected to God or to universe or to truth? What makes some people seem just so dusty and other people just seem to, just the wind of God blows from them everywhere they go? Harder questions. What happens to that spirit stuff when we die? Is it like, some of us like sports around here. Is it like when someone wins a championship and then those players, they retire, but that championship stays there forever? It is established. It is meaningful. Is it like that? Or is it like when you go and talk to your grandma and say, tell me about your grandmother? And she'll tell you some stories. And if you did some research, you could find something about your grandmother's grandmother. And as long as you hold on to all those memories together, is our spirit like that somehow? Or maybe even as our cells and our atoms break down, they get taken up into new living things and used in new ways, and we are recycled for new experiences even. Is that how we live again? Or does some omnipotent being just beam your spirit up somewhere and your spirit lasts eternally? Even in the song that we were singing, there were two stories there about the life everlasting or the resurrection of the dead. Two different ideas. Maybe that's what it is. God just takes these bodies, hangs out for a while, 1,000 years, whatever it is, and then poof, starts you over again. I don't know. So many stories. But the Christian narrative lands somewhere. All these different stories in the Christian tradition about who we are and how we matter and what matters in the long run is all based on a promise. The good news wrapped up in all the grief and the celebration of death and the end of life is two promises as far as I can tell. First of all, we are assured of never being alone, but being surrounded by love. Never alone, even in death, even in a coffin, even our ashes, never alone. Second, we are guaranteed that whatever fears we have about the end, our life continues to always matter. Whatever the details and the arguments and the images and the beliefs, in the Christian tradition, they tend to boil down to the promise that love holds on to us stronger than death tears us apart. And that's the story that Jesus shares. Jesus didn't conquer the death of bodies. We all know that bodies and cells and organs, they fail. Eventually they fail and folks die, and that's a fact. It's sad. But God can conquer the emptiness of that death. by breathing us into a world that runs on unquenchable love. God can conquer the fear of nothingness by inspiriting us into a world in which no matter how much we mess up, no matter how little we accomplish according to the world's standards, no matter what we deserve or think we deserve, we take part in a divine dream about the kingdom. It makes all things right. A kingdom where all things become right. Even in death, we take part in God's plan for a world that runs on love and runs on hope. And if we have confidence in that story, we can live more deeply now. We can go backwards from what happens later to what happens now. We can live deeply into our dust and into our spirit. That's how I'm going to wrap up today. I want to find some inspiration. It's some inspiritation for us to live as the people we were made to be. You're going to, at some point, need to steal a pen from your neighbor or just grab one out of your pocket, because there's a big piece of white space on the back of your... Where are they, Wes? Wes is going to start throwing them out at you. Maybe some people can help throw them out. There's an open space on your bulletin in the back, and you're going to get to write on this. You're going to think, how do we reach from here on out to the experiences and the emotion and the ideas and the legacies here before we're gone? What do you want to do to honor our spirits now before they become whatever that is later? When your dust becomes dust and ashes are ashes, how do you want your spirit to carry on? How do you want to hover on the edge of our vision, the density and luminosity of mist? I want to think of this as a spiritual bucket list. You know, a lot of us have bucket lists. You have things you want to do before you pass. Oh, there's a bucket right there. Wow, look at that. Ha, almost like it was planned. Your job, as we go through the end of this sermon, Daniel will play a bit of the next song we're going to sing. All the way through that song, think of the things that you want to do to allow your spirit to continue on. Write that, tear that off, come and put it in this bucket here as your expression of living into God's grace. Some of the kind of questions you can think on in this spiritual bucket list. What beauty do you want to explore in your life? What grace do you want to share with those around you? What forgiveness do you want to receive? What questions do you want to wrestle with? What good questions, not answer, but what questions do you want a response to and to wrestle with for the rest of your life? Who and how do you want to love with all of what makes you you? What wisdom do you want to pass on to other people, your children, whoever it might be? What do you want to hold hope in? What do you want to trust in? And whatever God looks like in your soul right now, how do you want that to continue to grow? And of all the things you know about yourself, what do you want to be meaningful after your body fails? So let's take a moment as Daniel plays through the verse once, and we can hear God's Ruach blowing through this garden. Whenever you feel the Spirit moving in you, drop them off in the bucket.